It's my great privilege and pleasure now to introduce today's presenter, Rebecca Ryan. Becky Ryan began presenting at NACADA conferences in the area of advisor training and development in 1996, including a highly acclaimed straight run from 1999 to 2009. Becky is an author for the NACADA New Advisor Guidebook and for Academic Advising Today. She served as a faculty member at the NACADA Summer Institutes, and she's a member of the NACADA Professional Development Committee. Becky has been with the University of Wisconsin-Madison since July 1994, where she serves as the Associate Director of the Cross College Advising Service and Coordinator of the Exploration Center for Majors and Careers. The use of group advising is a fairly obvious strategy, and I know that many folks I've talked to have turned to it as a way to deal with decreasing resources. But the point of today's broadcast is to consider how we can do more than just cope. We want to actually increase our effectiveness with the strategies that we employ during these changing times. So now we'll turn to Becky Ryan, and she'll share her expertise on using the group approach. Becky, why should our viewers consider group advising?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and shout out to familiar names I see on the list there. Regarding groups, there are a number of reasons why units and advisors tend to feel like they need to go to group use, and generally they center around 4 universal reasons. Either by necessity, because their advisor or advisee ratio is too much to handle, they've got time constraints, or perhaps they're trying to be more proactive with information rather than reactive. Of course, variety is another good reason to build into advising into your programming model so that you're not doing the same old thing all the time. They offer an excellent chance to build community among peer groups and support and collaborate with other units on your campus. And of course, there might be other reasons that are particular to your particular unit or to your own advising practice. Lots of times, challenge presents itself, and I think it's a good reminder that instead of just all of a sudden jumping to, we need to use groups, there still needs to be some thought that goes into the challenge equals opportunity. So when we hear that challenge creeping up behind us, we hear it as the door of opportunity knocking. There's a quick story I'll share about a famous pianist who was well known for playing at a club, and finally he got mad one night and said, I'm done playing at this club until you fix this piano, it's a piece of crap. When you fix it, I'll come back and play again. So he got a call a few weeks later, and he sat down, he tried to play on the piano, and he said, this piano isn't fixed, it's still totally. And the owner of the club said, well, I had it painted. We need to be solving the right problem with our group opportunities.
All right, well, that makes sense, Becky, but I've heard advisors say that they feel guilty about delivering messages to groups rather than giving focused attention to individuals. So what would you say to those folks?
Well, first of all, I'd say that guilt is a part of every advisor's daily life. And I think we all know it's often something we practice with no real reason for doing so. Presenting information in a variety of ways is not only good practice, but more likely developed to represent a developmental model of programming. As we know, changing times demand creative solutions, not more demands on our time. One thing to keep in mind is that groups can be of any size larger than 3. Not all groups should be thought of as a large canned presentation and of impersonal nature. Small groups can be very interactive, something our students here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison is a good thing about the groups we offer. I also believe that groups are an important supplement to what happens in a one-on-one advising because students can learn from each other. Not only do they allow you these wonderful things, but they also allow you to incorporate principles of a developmental advising philosophy across a spectrum of programming, that just shouldn't be happening in your one-on-one advising appointments, but you should also be asking yourselves, how do I track this programming and make it developmental across a spectrum of needs that students have access to information in different ways? Groups allow advisors to utilize a student-centered process in which advising is a shared responsibility, and technology is a great new idea to be using with groups, polling, for example, to name just one idea, to bring a new modern level of integration into the mix, and one I think our students are very comfortable with. And finally, groups can allow you to enhance your peer involvement in your advising programs, as well as allow you to interconnect with the learning community environments that exist on your campus. So there's no need for guilt. Guilt is actually should drive us into answering the real problem, solve the right problem.
Oh, but what about that personal factor, Becky? I think we all agree that building relationships is a key piece of the advising process. So can you make a group setting personal?
Well, there are certain challenges that exist with groups, but absolutely, groups can be personal. If you have a good group, you have a mechanism to allow for a shared approach to receiving the information that's being delivered. The big talking head in the front is not always the best way to proceed. As I've said earlier, after all, advising is a shared responsibility between the advisor and the advisee. By using groups, we can uniquely contribute to the developmental problem-solving skills, decision-making skills, exploration of academic and career interests, particularly by letting students learn from one another. And that's where I think personal becomes real, including validating that they are not all experiencing pressures alone, that they are together in some of these challenges and in these academic endeavors. After all, advising, when done well, of course, is a form of teaching, and group advising can be a prime example of this.
Okay, well then what do we need to do or to have to prepare for a group session?
In much of the same way that Nora was talking about planning for training advisors, I believe information is certainly applicable to how you design good group sessions. First of all, throwing them together out of desperation is never the right way to proceed. If you've tried that technique, you've probably learned that things could have gone a little smoother for you. So I believe good, thoughtful planning of what you're trying to accomplish is 40% of the work. Most importantly, you need to start with clearly defining your goals for the program. What need are you trying to meet, or what problem are you trying to solve? That's the most basic piece of information that you need to start with. From there, you can grow an agenda and an outline that clearly defines these goals and conscientiously and intentionally addresses what it is that you're trying to cover with that particular program. A program that is aligned with your learning outcomes is necessary. The use of group facilitation strategies, including introductions or icebreakers, group activities, or engaging materials and handouts, are also important. And I would think one of the most important things here, and I will claim guiltiness of this in my advising colleagues, is the tendency to overplan or overthink things. Sometimes the obvious solutions are right in front of us and are actually quite simple. I also believe that we need to pay good attention to the major contents that we use for training advisors. We're sort of role modeling how we present information to our students, and that the insight to our students certainly falls into the categories of informational, conceptual, or relational. Not only do the program planners consider which of these components they'll be addressing, they also need to think about how they lend themselves to a variety of topics and techniques. Your needs assessment has hopefully revealed some ideas about how your audience prefers to receive information.
What kinds of groups have you found useful, Becky?
Well, it's handy that there are a plethora of groups that are likely occurring on your campus already that you might find a way to tap into. Some of these, the obvious ones, like first-year seminars or first-year interest groups, orientation programs, and the like, you can get lots of ideas on size, format, and content by taking a good look around to see what's already out there. Important considerations for new group ideas What message or information do you feel students need? How might this message best be presented? Some ideas are simply made for technology, in my opinion, by using MediaCast, podcasts, chat rooms, Facebook, and tweeting. But there are also things that are just much better done in a small, intimate, conversational type group. The point is, don't let your opportunity to use groups make your role different than it is. Use groups to make your role more efficient and well-rounded. And remember, here is to solve the right problem.
Have you found that groups are best facilitated by the advisor, or can other people be involved as well?
Absolutely. Depending on the content, I think other people, such as counselors, student services coordinators, faculty members, other students, upper class students in your majors, for example, and certain guest speakers, very useful as they bring in a different perspective. We're all here to help the students in one way, shape, or form. One of my favorite things I like to say on campus to students is that they really should be in the business of building their own personal board of directors by putting students in front of other people that also help them make good decisions in their academic career. Simply buys into the fact that there are lots of people out there who can help us accomplish our dreams. I'm scary for some people, but the thing to remember is it's the very same information that you give to your students. Your skills are transferable. So while you might be most comfortable sitting one-on-one with a student in your office, and that's what you've always done and that's what works for you, do not fear that you can't transfer some of those abilities to a larger group. Advisor training and development should have prepared you with a solid set of these transferable skills. So become aware of your preferred way of delivering and try to work that into your programming. For example, do you like large groups or small groups? Do you prefer more conversational groups, or do you prefer more working on a task and then talk about it afterwards? Other important pieces of transferable skills that I think advisors bring to groups are their knowledge of broader campus resources, institutional policies and procedures, hopefully an understanding of group dynamics and student development, strong facilitation skills, confident and solid public speaking skills, being a collaborative team player and adaptable problem solver, as we've all found out this morning at my expense a little bit, and a sense of humor, which I think is probably the thing that gets me through most things in my life.
Yep, that sense of humor is really what it's all about, isn't it? So given the choice of examples, needs, and demands, it does all kind of seem sort of vague. So Becky, can you give us an example of one simple group solution?
I'll use an easy example. A person that was referred to me here on campus about a year ago by her dean. She is a one-person advisor in a major of 1,200 students. It's an interdisciplinary student, and so there are lots of questions about what the major is and so forth. And she sort of inherited the old way of doing advising and became immediately overwhelmed with how to meet the need of her students. There were more demand for her appointment time slots available. She did what many advisors did and immediately said, I'll do walk-ins. And at least a couple times a week, I'll just open my door and it'll be walk-ins, and that'll be fast, and I'll be able to meet lots of students at the same time. Well, it turned out to be an actual worse situation for her. Her walk-ins were so overrun that they often kept her there hours later than she had actually intended to be there. So when we met, we sat down and we really mapped out what it is her students need to know, what were the bulk of those questions in walk-ins, how were her appointments being used efficiently. And we came up with an idea where she would do orientation information sessions, I'll call them, into the major. They cannot come and see an appointment until they attend one of the information sessions that are offered by upper class students in the major. The basic information with the curriculum handouts, how to get into the first frontline course that you need to have in order to be able to declare the major, and a little bit of personal stories from the students about the different plans that they have for using that major. Moving to that model has freed up her by goo-gobs, for lack of a more academic sounding word. She has found balance in her life, and she's been building on this now as a way to use her peer advisors for other realistic things that they can do that allow the content of her one-on-one appointments to be much more individual to the students at more difficult upper-level classes and choices that they have to make.
What are some things that we should watch out for?
Well, there are always some things to watch out for. Challenges haunt us around every corner, do they not? So as you're moving into the group advising model, you do simply want to pay attention to that these are some things that may pose challenges. I don't think all of them are necessarily immediately available. So for example, it took us a few years back to figure out that the popular Wednesday night show was the reason we wouldn't get anybody at our Wednesday night walk-ins. Having timing and asking residence halls, when are students, doing things together as groups, when would not be a good time to do a group advising, how captive is your audience, how strong of a need was that for them to come. If your space is impersonal, is there a way that you can make it work? Can you pull the chairs together? These are things, they're sort of a heads up that can catch you off guard if you're not thinking ahead of the time. You need to have an agenda and a motive and a thing there. Students want to know that their time is being well used, and they want to walk out of there with some kind of information that they've received by attending your program. So paying attention to the challenges up front might help you circumvent any problems while the group is happening.
Okay, Becky, my last question, and here's where we really get down to what we're about today. How do we actually know that we're improving our effectiveness with these types of sessions? How do you assess the outcomes of your groups?
Assessment is an absolute must. You can't just go into this blindly. I believe pre- and post measures are important. I also believe assessment is actually part of your overall needs assessment to begin with. What needs do you feel you need to meet for students? How do you parcel those out and balance those with the staff that you have to work with? So assessment is important, and once the planning has been done and the group has happened, then you need to ask yourself what kind of assessment particular type of group. Formative and summative evaluations can be done. Pre- and post measures where students come in, they complete one task, they receive information in some vehicle of some sort, and then they do a post test to see if they've actually learned anything in that group. Thinking about ways to measure your learning outcomes against your group material, those might be broader learning outcomes that you have established for your program. And of course, how does this group topic fit with your overall mission of your unit? Assessment is necessary. Feedback drives change, and nothing is ever perfect out of the gate the first time. You need to be persistent, and assessment is going to give you information that's going to help you be persistent and make good changes that will help your programs grow and be more successful in the future. Of course, we'll just conclude with, at the end of the day, we only have so many hours to meet the needs of our students. I believe the new paradigm for advising must include a variety of approaches that not only recognizes the developmental need for information by students, but the balance among advisors and our staff.
Thanks, Becky.